The CMO Confidential podcast is a proud member of the I Hear Everything podcast network. Looking to launch or scale your podcast? I Hear Everything delivers podcast production, growth, and monetization solutions that transform your words into profit. Ready to give your brand a voice? Then visit iheareverything.com.
Discover the future of AI-powered digital experiences. Adobe Summit is live in Las Vegas, March 17th through the 20th. If you can't make it to the conference in person, join Summit online free from anywhere. Access inspirational talks from global brand leaders like Coca-Cola, Unilever, Marriott, and more in live-streamed, insightful keynotes and Adobe Sneaks, co-hosted by comedian Ken Jeong. Select from over 30 expert-led sessions. Register for free at summit.adobe.com/CMO Confidential.
Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Lind.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com. I'm here today with my guest, Gary Briggs. Today's topic: marketing observations and lessons learned from the 2024 presidential election. Gary started his career at Pepsi and McKinsey and went on to run marketing at PayPal, eBay, Motorola, and Facebook. He is currently on the boards of Etsy and Petco and recently worked on the latest presidential campaign. He's here today to talk about marketing observations and what we can all learn from this election. Full disclosure, we both work together at eBay, teach several classes at CMO Bootcamp, and are both CMO coaches, so we've known each other quite a while. And this is Gary's second time on the show. Welcome back, Gary. It is great to see you.
Hey, Mike, thanks. It's, being a repeat guest, I guess I hit some threshold. So here we go.
You are, eventually we'll make mugs and send you a mug or something. But why don't we just
I'm offering the swag. As my wife says, I've collected fleets in Silicon Valley. That's basically been my career.
Absolutely. I have massive amounts of. So we haven't got there yet. We're just a little show. So why don't we just start? Gary, give us an overview of the marketing scope of this election. Money, PACs, advertising, PR, news, and more. Paint us a picture. And then after that, you can tell us your responsibilities.
It is a kind of scale. And what's fascinating about political campaigns is they start, with several people. And in the case of presidential campaigns, go to thousands and over the course, months, and then go to zero again, which is really stunning. And the amount of money, particularly specifically as relates to presidential campaigns, the amount of money spent now, I think the estimations is that the 2024 presidential will likely hit north of 10 billion in spend. Wow. Maybe 12 if you go, across all the different hard side, soft side, meaning coordinated groups, independent groups, and what was spent. A significant amount of that is spent on media. In rough math, I would estimate that across the various entities, there's probably $4 or $5 billion spent in media. The Harris campaign, which I was on the Harris campaign and Biden-Harris campaign, we spent about $750 million. And what's notable about that, and I'm happy, obviously, we'll go into detail, is spent in about 6 months. And it's largely, except from some cases where you buy national ads, in linear advertising, digital is all much more targeted.
Right.
You are spending that in about 18% of the country, which is the swing state profile now. 7 states plus what's called Nebraska 2, which is Omaha, because Nebraska, much like Maine, splits its electoral votes. But you're spending in 18% of the country. So from our language of NAR, National Advertise Rate, take 750 million, divide that by two, divide that and or multiply that by 2 because it's 6 months for an
Yeah.
annual rate, and then divide that by 0.18, which is the footprint, and you're talking about a scale that's no other company spends at that scale, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, later about growth rating points and, diminished returns and things like that. But it is a stunning amount of money in a short amount of time.
Yeah. So you're spinning up what is essentially a massive, I mean, marketing corporation or marketing and PR corporation of 1,000 people and very
Thousands of people. Yeah.
thousands of people. And then you're spending billions of dollars. And it's really the equivalent of tens of billions of dollars if you were a real company. And then it all vaporizes as soon, or most of it vaporizes as soon as the campaign's over, which is that's an awful lot of just stuff going on in a really short period of time. Tell us your role in this, because you mentioned 750 million or something. Tell us your role in.
Yeah. So I joined the Biden campaign in the middle of April of last year. So April 24, as senior advisor for paid media. I worked for Jen O'Malley Dillon, who was the campaign chair, but really was responsible for coordinating the budgeting and the agency relationships and the trafficking of creative, particularly on the linear side, less so on the digital side, which I'm getting into, across the campaign. I would tell you, just to kind of cut to it, I wasn't as busy during Biden's run, in part because Biden had his own, he's a sitting president.
Right.
He's his own comms team, partially of whom, are advising him. And he had has a comms director who he had worked with for about 40 years, named Mike Donnell. And so they didn't really need, my help except on a coordinated basis.
Yeah.
Once Harris became the candidate and there was a reorganization, I got tons busier, which I'm happy to get into.
Yeah, tell us how you got busier, because that must have been crazy.
Look, I have all sorts of stories of, Biden's debate night, when the process of him dropping out and Harris, scaling up. But the scale up with Harris was stunning. We had no sense of how fast we were going to raise money, but in the first 5 days, we were raising hundreds of millions of dollars very, very quickly. And notably around media, we had to make decisions. This changeover was happening in July. We had to make decisions in early August for buying long lead media. We basically did television reservations, and we'd already done digital reservations. So we were making television reservations off of a projection of what we would eventually raise in the campaign,
Right.
off of days worth of fundraising, and an unprecedented experience of, changing over candidates with 107 days, until the campaign ended. So we placed, if I haven't remembered the number correctly, about $300 million worth of television reservations in mid-August, off of really, a couple of weeks of fundraising, projecting how much money we're going to raise through the end of the campaign. So it was, and then in terms of my own role, I had gotten, really good working relationship with the principal deputy campaign manager, a guy named Quentin Fultz. Quentin's really talented guy. He ran Pritzker's campaign and for the governor of Illinois. He ran both of Warnock's campaigns for the Senate in Georgia. You recognize Quentin if you follow any of this. He's on TV a ton.
All right.
Great, talented guy. But, I had a lot more marketing operations experience than he had. So I kind of ran that for him. And then really in the last 2 months, I was part of a nightly call, that we had with Jen O'Malley Dillon, which would be, Quentin presenting with me, supporting him, along with Rob Flaherty, who was the digital director, deputy campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, who's a campaign manager, David Pluck, who was a senior advisor, and Jen O'Malley Dillon, or JOD as everybody called her.
So this must have been super interesting, but also crazy, because you're making bets like wild without any certainty. And then you have to have a strategy behind those bets. How did you lay out the strategy and the media plans with everybody where obviously you're way more experienced than an awful lot of people in that.
Yeah.
how'd you lay out the strategies and the media plans without knowing the exact budget and, just you're kind of at speed doing work that companies of this size would take months to do? You're going to do it in a week or two. Tell us the up to the strategies.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I got give tons of credit to the analytics team. We have a really stunning and very well experienced analytics team. The analytics team, one of the things that's unique about political campaigns is you have a lot of first party data. You have the voter file,
Okay.
and the voter file is essentially scored, and you use other data sets to do that. You use Target Smart and LiveRamp and lots of first party.
So just help me with the voter file. So a voter file on me would show everything about me, how many times where I live and everything else, and how many times I voted.
Yeah.
And what
No, I
else?
don't know. I don't know for whom you voted. I
Yeah.
don't know, but I would know if you voted in the Republican or Democratic primary, or if
Yeah.
you were independent, and depending on the state, if you voted in, one primary or another. And essentially, what political campaigns are extended probability trees. It's you and people like you, your propensity to vote, and the probability you'll vote for me. And you run that math and you get to, 51.6 and 48.4. That's essentially the way the math works. And
No.
and so you're pending data to your record constantly based upon signals that we get. Do you donate? Do you respond to content? Do you follow certain interests? Do you go to an evangelical church? These are all things that are signals about your propensity or your probability, particularly in the lottery, your probability of voting for X person or Y
So
person.
this is like a data tornado, just gathering up more and more data as you get more and more people,
Yeah,
and extending this probability tree as fast and deep as possible. Is that a way to think about it?
exactly right. And there's all sorts of nuance to that. But then to your question about media, you're then running game theory exercises. This is where the analytics team was really great. And to kind of don't leave the punchline at the door. We knew we had a high risk of losing. I mean, and I can kind of get into that in more detail, but we were in a deep hole most of all of 24, climbed our way, we thought almost fully out of it, particularly in the last couple of weeks until the very end. We had become more optimistic, but it is essentially that. And then you're basically looking at um, media consumption, and through this game theory, your path to 270. The thing that the analytics team makes very clear is you don't need to get to 350 delegates in the electoral college. You need to get to 270. It's 270 to win.
Right.
And if we captured the states that were most likely, in our case, Democratic, and we captured what is called the blue wall, which is Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and Nebraska 2, which is Omaha.
Just
That's
those two.
270 on the
Just
nose.
those two. Not the state, just the two, right?
It's the one. It's
Yeah.
one delegate for Omaha, yeah. But
Okay.
it's Nebraska 2, NE2, and in all our decks, it was NE2.
Okay.
And if you capture Omaha, you get to 270. You don't need to be at 275. You just need 270. And you're looking at the probabilities of winning, X or Y state. And then based upon that allocating, and the voters in those states, and then based upon that allocating dollars in media, and then messages to that media based upon that game theory exercise.
Well, let's talk about the media, then go to the messaging, because the media here, then you say, look, all right, I got to get to 270. I got the blue wall. I got Nebraska 2. I'm going to go after this group of customers with as many messages as I can get to them, or how do I then decide how much media I even hit them with? Or is it everything I can buy?
Money rules in a way that I wish it we talked about, make this somewhat naively, but money rules. Like if your fundraising is the lifeblood here, and I have all sorts of issues with it, but that is the game that is played.
It is the game. Look, you can hate the game, but
that's right. Don't hate the player, as they say. Yeah, don't hate the player. So That is the way it works. And so in our particular case, what happened when Harris came in was very quickly we started to see that what we thought at the time. Now, obviously, people watching this will make all sorts of snarky comments, but what it looked like was Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, and then North Carolina were coming into play. In other words, they were kind of out of play. And
Right.
we had these 7 states plus Nebraska too, who were in play. And you're looking at, your profile of the voter, what types of media that they consume, the way to get to them. We set records in terms of digital spend, for example. And we spent a lot on digital, an historic amount compared to any campaign that came before us, and knew that, the ability to reach people through digital media was critical, both paid and organic. Now, organic, by the way, is massively important. And we can get into talking later, and I'll editorialize a little bit about the role of, organic media, social media, and kind of where we are in the media landscape. We can come back to that. But suffice to say, as far as paid media, you're looking at, I need to reach XYZ voter, whether that is a Black voter in a given state or a Latino voter in another state or a suburban white woman in another state. You're trying to reach those voters and drive, again, the propensities and probabilities through, and then you sample and you look and you do lots of polling behind that to look at how you're doing. And our polling, as you might imagine, had a much bigger response number than the national or the state level polls, because we can afford them.
Right.
And we're using that constant learning to then drive your media allocations. And granted, we were putting very significant reservations in. The reservations were aggressive. Certainly, in many cases, we went above and beyond that based upon the fundraising we eventually saw. But you can also cancel reservations and move reservations and things like that. There's some, not to get too much in the weeds, you benefit from the fact that as the candidate, you get a candidate rate versus if you're an outside party. In terms of the media, you spend.
Oh, so you get less than rate card if you're the candidate, right?
Yeah, you get a better rate card if you're the candidate. You get typically a better slot too. You can actually, because you're buying a lot, and you don't see that in digital, but you see that in linear. And then the other thing you're dealing with is constantly trying to get a read on what the other side is doing. What are their reservations? What can you discern from how they're spending on YouTube? Interestingly, the Trump campaign, for example, was using YouTube essentially like television, where, which I think is a very interesting insight. They essentially were, what's called negative targeting, or basically exclusion targeting, where they would buy Pennsylvania, but they would exclude Philly and Pittsburgh. So they wouldn't necessarily, those are obviously, whatever the town, city might be, was heavily Democratic.
Their probability tree would say they have a very low probability of doing anything there. So they're taking their money out of there.
Yeah, to take their money out of there, and then they're using it much more like television, and then targeting particular demographics, in terms of age and other demos within that media strategy. So we were constantly looking at kind of their media strategy to compare to ours, and then these outside groups, these PACs, are massive. I mean, there was a lot and has been a lot written, a lot of ink spilled, so to speak, of how much the Harris campaign versus the Trump campaign spent. But in many cases, particularly in the last weeks, even with the main PAC aligned with the Biden-Harris and Democrats, which is called Future Forward, with all the money that they were spending, we were still being outspent in some cases based upon really 3 very large PACs that were supporting Trump plus other groups. So, you've got, in the case of Trump, 3 organizations, but 3 people spent over $700 million supporting Trump. That's Elon Musk, Thomas Mellon, banking family, and Miriam Adelson, which is Sands, which is the
Las Vegas
gambling business. So, this is the money part of it, and tracking that, getting a sense constantly of like, how many GRPs are they buying? How many digital reservations are they placing? What can we discern about their YouTube strategy or their, et cetera?
You have a massive analytics organization doing this, but then you also have to have people trafficking all this stuff and running it around, because you buy the media, and then And then you have
Oh, yeah.
it, gotta cancel it. So, I mean, this is like a full-on giant agency working, and is
Yeah,
everything
I mean, it's
coordinated
surprising.
staff?
We had look, and I was the noob, by the way. So
Yep.
clearly, I mean, we had a number of people who had been on the 20 campaigns, 16 campaigns, and 12 campaigns. The people that had been through this. We worked particularly with a firm called Blue Sky, that really phenomenal, really good firm, made creative, but also helped us through the trafficking, along with a specialized linear media firm. And on the digital side, we used a number of firms too, including Bully Pulpit and C plus K and a bunch of firms that you would not otherwise know,
Yeah.
but are really good, very experienced digital firms who have the spreadsheets and the trafficking
And
data.
do they ramp up for this? Like
Oh
retailers
yeah.
ramp up at
Yep.
holiday, like they are gonna
Yep.
hire like 3 times the amount of people.
What's stunning is, you have these young people or people, in their 20s and 30s who cycle into these things every cycle, committed this and then know very well that if they lose, they're out of a job, I had this gentleman who sat right to my right, and we were in this, camping headquarters are not very, very glamorous, and
You don't get a big office in the window.
and no micro kitchens and, full of food. But this guy, Scott, who will give us, but Scott, who just sat to my side, and another guy named Andrew and Medha, who was my, chief right hand too. She made things who had all been through these things before. So, I mean, Scott was like encyclopedic. Like, you need to know something about rural radio in Michigan. Scott knows that. Like, and you need to know something about, how the actual media reallocations are going to work in the outskirts of basically southern Georgia. Scott is going to know, and it's just the talent goes against these quixotic extra, it's stunning. Because God knows these folks could be doing lots of other things.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that later. Is this good for your career or not? But you have all these media plans that you're buying a lot of times before you know the messaging,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you gotta go buy these because you can't it's not like you go to the store and you buy, "I'm buying this today." You gotta buy it and own it, and there's probably some, "I'll buy all I can" to take
Yeah.
these guys out of the game as well. How do you do the messaging now that you have the media?
Well, I mean, so you know your audience, you know your candidate, mostly, and always, there's surprises that come along the way, which we can kind of get into, not to be pull punches, but and absolutely, we knew that the economy was a massive issue for us.
Yeah.
And we can go into this in much greater detail, but it'll take too much time. But the short of it is, we knew we were in a whole lot again in the economy. Essentially, if you ask people how they personally were doing, they were generally optimistic. If they asked how the country was doing, particularly, right direction, wrong direction, which is a very much of a bellwether question, it was bad. I mean, and when you raise people's cost of living by 25% in 3.5 years, they're mad. And so we knew the economy was a massive issue. So when you're looking at messaging, you're looking at things that are certainly broad scale, like the economy, or in the case of this campaign, border and immigration, border policy and immigration. And then you're also looking at a set of issues that might be much more important to smaller subsets of voters. Now, this is where you might get into what's called constituency media, which is, Latino, Asian Americans, African Americans, what are issues that might be important? Suburban women,
Or farmers or something like that.
yeah,
And
exactly.
any demographic or psychographic you can find, you're gonna take it, right?
Yeah, because like again, you're trying to get to 270 and you're trying to win the state by by one, and because it's winner take all, and it's a very different game theory than typical market share in packaged goods or insurance or tech, the industries that you and I were in. And so as a result, yeah, that's how you kind of break down the messaging is then, how much are we looking at emphasis on particular messages and to whom over what period of time? And then, day in, day out, and in some cases, hour in, hour out, you're reacting to what's going on in the news. I mean, what we've not talked about, and we don't spend a lot of time on it. There is an entire industry that follows this industry, and
Yeah.
it's called cable news.
Yeah.
And
And it has a lot of 24-hour channels that
yeah,
it
nothing. I mean,
yeah.
Rust never sleeps, I think is the way it goes. So that is, an input, as well as, what are the candidates saying? What are, obviously the talking heads saying, and what's the voter saying? What is the voter, paying attention to in this, as we all know, this kind of, drier on high setting of the last months of a political presidential campaign.
Tune in next week for part 2 of our conversation with Gary Briggs as we discuss more about the paid media strategy around the 2024 presidential campaign and how it helped to shape the outcome of the election.
Discover the future of AI-powered digital experiences. Adobe Summit is live in Las Vegas, March 17th through the 20th. If you can't make it to the conference in person, join Summit online free from anywhere. Access inspirational talks from global brand leaders like Coca-Cola, Unilever, Marriott, and more in live-streamed, insightful keynotes and Adobe Sneaks, co-hosted by comedian Ken Jeong. Select from over 30 expert-led sessions. Register for free at summit.adobe.com/CMO confidential.